War was not always the domain of trained fighters. There was a time when ordinary farmers, men who spent their days in the fields, became the backbone of entire armies because of a single invention. An object so simple, yet so revolutionary, it shifted the balance of power, collapsed kingdoms, and forced rulers to rethink everything they knew about warfare. This is the story of the iron-tipped spear, the invention that turned ordinary farmers into soldiers. For most of early human history, armies were the privilege of kings. Battles were fought by elite warriors raised from birth to fight. Think of the chariot archers of Egypt, the noble hoplites of Athens, or the samurai of medieval Japan. They trained for years, ate well, lived comfortably, and were protected by expensive armor and weapons. But the world was changing. Populations were rising, borders were expanding. Rulers needed more than elite fighters, they needed manpower, mass manpower. And the answer came from the most unexpected place, the blacksmith's forge. It began with iron. Bronze had dominated warfare for centuries, but bronze was expensive, fragile, and dependent on precious materials that were hard to find. When iron smelting spread across ancient civilizations, everything changed. Iron ore was everywhere, buried in the soil of villages, mountains, and even beneath the fields where farmers plowed their crops. Suddenly, weapons were not exclusive treasures of kings. They were tools anyone could own. And the simplest, easiest, most devastating weapon to make was the spear. A long wooden shaft, an iron-tipped head. Cheap, reproducible, deadly. A weapon that required no lifelong training, unlike the bow or the sword. A farmer could pick up a spear in a single afternoon and become part of a disciplined phalanx by the end of the week. The spear democratized war. Look at ancient Greece. Elite aristocrats once dominated battle, riding in chariots or fighting as lone heroes like in Homer's tales. But with iron spears, common men, farmers, potters, shepherds, were suddenly capable of standing shoulder to shoulder in the powerful hoplite phalanx. These were not nobles or warriors born into privilege. They were everyday citizens. But when they marched in formation, shields overlapping, spears pointed forward, they became an unstoppable wall of iron and wood that could crush any elite warrior foolish enough to stand in its path. The invention of the spear transformed political power too. When ordinary men became soldiers, they demanded rights. The citizen soldier was born. Democracy in Athens wasn't only philosophy. It was backed by the strength of thousands of armed farmers who fought to defend their city. The spear didn't just build armies, it built nations. But Greece was only one chapter. In ancient China, during the spring and autumn and warring states periods, rulers faced massive conflicts involving hundreds of thousands of troops. They needed weapons they could produce by the tens of thousands. The iron spear became the backbone of their armies, allowing peasants to transform overnight into disciplined ranks that could challenge the greatest lords. Even the mighty Roman Empire relied on the same principle. Before the professional legions, Rome used the hastati and princepi, citizens who wielded the hosta, the Roman spear. These were farmers called from their lands to defend the Republic, and in doing so, they expanded Rome's borders across Italy and beyond. The spear spread across continents, cultures, and empires. Africa had its own powerful versions, like the Zulu assegai, which Shaka Zulu reshaped into a short stabbing spear, turning his warriors into a living storm that shattered rival tribes. In Europe, the Franks, the Celts, and the Germanic tribes all relied on spears because they could arm entire tribes instantly. And in the Islamic world, early caliphates expanded with armies where many soldiers carried simple but effective spears alongside shields. Everywhere iron spread, the spear followed. But the spear wasn't just a weapon of opportunity, it was a weapon of strategy. A sword was personal, requiring skill and strength. The spear was communal. It relied on formation, discipline, and unity. A single spear fighter could be defeated by a trained swordsman, But 1,000 spear fighters standing in formation could stop cavalry charges, repel elite warriors, and hold the line against nearly anything. The invention reshaped warfare entirely. Cavalry, once the unstoppable kings of the battlefield, now faced lines of iron-tipped spears pointing toward them like a deadly forest. A charging horse would hesitate, stumble, or impale itself. Infantry didn't fear mounted warriors anymore, because the spear gave them power through organization rather than individual skill. It also changed kings. Rulers who once relied on elite nobles now found themselves commanding massive armies of common people. With this came loyalty, but also rebellion. When your army is made of farmers, you must keep them fed, rewarded, and respected. Otherwise, the same people you armed could turn against you. The rise of large empires, from Persia to Rome to China, was built on the backs of spear-wielding commoners, and the fall of kings, rebellions, and revolutions were often led by those same armed masses. The spear gave the people a voice, sometimes through unity, sometimes through blood. Even in medieval Europe, long after swords and armor became symbols of knighthood, the humble spear continued to dominate battlefields. Knights feared the tightly formed ranks of pikemen, longer spears wielded by farmers who could unhorse even the most elite mounted warriors. Swiss pikemen, for example, became legendary for defeating heavily armored knights with nothing but long spears and pure discipline. Their victories reshaped European warfare and forced nobles to respect infantry again. The spear's legacy is so vast that even by the time gunpowder arrived, it didn't disappear. Muskets were slow to reload, so armies developed pike and shot formations where long spears protected gunmen, keeping cavalry and swordsmen at bay. Once again, the spear was the equalizer. But beyond all the history, the spear carries a deeper truth. It represents the moment humanity realized that strength was not in the hands of a few elite warriors, but in the unity of ordinary people. Farmers who once only fought nature, weather, seasons, soil, learned to fight invaders, empires, and tyrants. The spear gave them power. The spear gave them identity. The spear made them soldiers. It is perhaps the most human of all weapons, born of necessity, shaped by community, carried by those who had everything to lose and everything to protect. And in that transformation, one simple invention changed the world. Not through kings or heroes, but through farmers. Through ordinary men who, with an iron-tipped weapon in their hands, reshaped the fate of civilizations. The invention that turned farmers into soldiers still echoes in history today, reminding us that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin with the simplest tools.